Shalom and welcome. I'm Rabbi Eric Tokajer, and this week's question comes from Jim. And Jim's question is about Hebrews chapter 8, verse 13. Now Jim's question, as it reads, says, "In that he saith, a new covenant, he hath made the first old. Now that which decayeth and is waxeth old is ready to vanish away." And his question was, is this verse talking about the Old Testament or the Old Covenant? And many people teach that. As a matter of fact, quite often they say that Hebrews 8:13 is the proof text that the New Covenant has replaced the Old Covenant, or the Brit Chadashah has replaced the Tanakh and the Torah as far as how we should live and run and walk out our walk with the Lord. However, there are a couple of things we need to look at. First of all, I read from the King James Version on purpose. The reason I read from that is, if you'll notice, it says, "In that he saith a new," and then the next word there in the King James is the word covenant. Although if you look at your King James Bible, you'll find out that the word covenant is in italics because it's not actually in the Greek text. The Greek text does not have the word covenant there. It was put there by translators so that you would understand that context and that text the way they wanted you to understand it, or the way they understood it in bringing it about. In the TLV Bible, it reads this way: "In saying new, he has treated the first as old, but what is being made old and aging is close to vanishing away." Now, first we've established that the word covenant isn't in the text there. The next thing we have to establish is, what could it be talking about? Well, Hebrews is written somewheres between the years 65 and 68 on this calendar. That's CE, Common Era, after the death of Messiah. Messiah has died at the time Hebrews is written for over 30 years. Now, I don't know about you, but my Bible says that the covenant or the testament comes into effect with the death of the testator. So clearly this verse couldn't be talking about the New Covenant, Old Covenant, or the New Testament, Old Testament, because that would have had to come into effect with the death of Yeshua. Another thing to notice is that time. What happens shortly after 65 to 68? Well, the year 70. The year 70 is the time when the temple is destroyed, when the Roman conquest of Jerusalem completes, and we see the destruction of the temple and temple worship, and the priesthood that ran things in the temple, operated in the temple, did the sacrifices in the temple, all the things that were done there. So what is getting ready to wax old and vanish away is not the Old Testament or the Old Covenant, but clearly by context, it's talking about the temple worship and the priesthood that operated in the temple. The temple worship, the priesthood was getting old and getting ready to go away. And just a few years after this was written, that happens. The entire book of Hebrews up until this point is establishing the priesthood of Yeshua as a Melchizedekan priest. And that priesthood is what changed that we read about here in Hebrews chapter 8. Thank you for tuning in. If you have a question you'd like to ask, just message me on Facebook at Rabbi Eric Tokajer. Thank you and shalom.